Now, next up on the live stream, we have another live stream exclusive. Christian Ward, the Chief Data Officer of Yext, is going to be talking about Conways Law and AI, improving the customer journey with search. Christian, why don't you come on? Hey there.
Hello, good day to you, Alan.
You know, it's funny that years ago when I was running our family's company, I did not know that the problems I was looking at actually had a name called Conways Law. And yes, now I do. So it seems so obvious in retrospect, but kind of not so obvious to start with. So with that endorsement of the content that's about to come, Christian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Alan. And thanks to Commerce Connect. Very exciting to discuss this with you today. Just to your point, Alan, Conway's Law, I didn't know what it was until about 12 weeks ago. I had experienced the same thing you did. Once I read it, I said, how did I not know about this thing? So hopefully for everyone today, we can learn a little bit about what this law states and how AI and really the customer journey are being affected by sort of dealing with this structure. So I'm going to start off, though, first just talking about, for all of you around my age, you probably remember how search optimization makes companies and businesses do sort of crazy things. So many of you may have had AAA plumbing to your house or AAA, whatever business. And they did that because in the old Yellow Pages days, the algorithm to discover a business was alphabetical. And so by throwing a few A's in front of whatever you actually did, you could rank higher in the way that people made phone calls to identify a business to help them. That behavior continues today. In fact, search engine optimization causes a lot of craziness. I noticed this one the other day, which kind of blew me away, which was all these listings for an ER in Texas, an emergency room. Well, you see, they say ER near me Plano or ER near me Madison. And I'm thinking, oh, this is just a data error. There's something wrong. Surely the business didn't actually, yes, they did. They actually put near me directly into the business title. Why? Because there's been a few years of these near me searches. And it's not really near me in terms of the actual text. It's just been sort of the algorithmic approach to local for a very long time. And so I saw this one and it got me thinking, I wonder how many other businesses are doing this. And sure enough, I found the dentist near me and the all too terrifying sushi near me. And this behavior, you can understand why it happens. And it's really because whether it was the Yellow Pages with putting A's in front of your name, or it's Google and trying to show up, one of the most important things people think about is search engine optimization. And I'd like to offer, we really want to get away from thinking about just search engines. And what's happening in the world is we need to think about more about the overall search experience optimization. So not just what happens in Google or in the phone book, but what happens on an ongoing basis. And the reason why I bring this up is because there are some big challenges that the customer journey is facing. And these challenges, particularly in retail or in any business that is trying to drive either online traffic or off-site foot traffic, these two challenges are something that we have to conquer. And the way to think about these two challenges, there's really two. One is sort of the information overload paradox. And really what this is, and you've seen this in your own life, as we as humans see more information, our ability to process that information actually declines. In fact, this is me at the grocery store in front of 150 bottles of wine. And unfortunately, I can't decide what to get. And I actually get a little dumber. And we can see that in cognitive psychology tests where people can't really process. This actually triggers your fight or flight mentality when there's just too much information. The other major challenge, and one that I would say Google is phenomenal at and has gotten so good at, is the explore versus exploit trade-off. See, most people have learned over the last 2 decades that they don't do linear journeys. Like, I don't know, last time Alan or anyone listening ever kind of got into a linear funnel and did every step as the marketing funnel wanted you to. And that's kind of what we all grew up with, which is, Christian Ward is a certain age with this number of kids. He lives here. Let's just put him in this linear persona. The reality is nobody does that anymore. Everyone has learned you can ask via search and go in any direction you want to really explore what you're looking for. Now, that explore is really what search does, but really the exploit, and I mean exploit in the proper definitional sense, meaning to take an action for one's benefit. Well, what happens is these two concepts of exploring and the exploit need to be very close together. And you'll see this a lot of times if you're on Google, for example, and you say flights to New York. They'll show you all the flights, but then you can book it right there. The exploit is right there. And that's something that search has added. If you go to Amazon and ask a product, you'll see buy now right next to the product. So it's this combination of these two challenges that we as both retail businesses or technology companies have to tackle to enable a better customer journey. If you want to think of these in two sides of a coin, there's sort of the search, the issue of too much information while you look for it. And then as you're searching, the ability to make a proper decision and to engage with a brand or a business. Now, as we started off with, I'll bring up Conways Law now, because I think this, we will all see a mirror here held up to our own businesses. Conway's Law stipulates that businesses or organizations tend to recreate their bureaucracy in a digital sense. And what that means is if your organizational chart looks like this, let's say you're a bank and you have the retail division and the wealth management division and the mortgage division and the credit card division. Every one of those has their own method of communicating as an organization. Unfortunately, you were all in the same meeting to then get a drop-down menu put on the website. So your digital structure mirrors your organizational structure. And this actually is the antithesis of a typical customer journey. Most customers aren't trying to understand your bureaucracy. They just want to know if you have a lower interest rate on the credit card, or maybe a credit card with better travel benefits, or maybe a mortgage loan rate. They're looking for very specific things, but we tend to make people learn our own bureaucracy. And I'll give you a great example. If we think about this as the problem where we can't find the right answers to questions, this probably embodies it. I don't know how many of you have recently been in this soul-sucking experience, but this is the DMV where I live in Florida. And I don't mean to pick on them, but if you've been there, you know what I mean, which is typically each one of these windows that you go up to represents a different element of the bureaucracy of the DMV, where you'll have one area for teenage drivers, one area for a new photo, and it goes on and on. Now, what's fascinating is if you go and visit their online site, you'll see exactly the same problem. This is an organization whose principal and only real focus is providing motor vehicle driving licenses to individuals who have moved to the state or teenagers that are getting started. They have 105 different drop-down menus. That's a lot of bureaucracy to try and learn. And so for most people, when you think of a customer journey, and by the way, I'll offer for many retailers, this is unbelievably true. Like if you go to the Gap or you go to Banana Republic, and I'm not picking on them, it's just they have the sunglasses division, then they have the men's sunglasses division, then they have the women's sunglasses, then they have children's. They have a division and a goal for every one of those. But quite frankly, for a family that's just visiting Florida that needs sunglasses, they have a very different way of looking at it. And so what we see is that there's this trouble of sort of recreating this bureaucracy. Now, why is that important, especially in the retail experience? Well, if you're thinking about retail or any sort of commerce, and again, whether in person or digitally, there's this concept that's gotten a lot of attention over the last, I'd say probably 5 to 7 years. Lots of books on this called flow. And flow is when people get into a cognitive state where they can actually engage and really get mentally focused on a topic. Now, why that's important is there is a direct correlation between people getting into a state of flow and them engaging or transacting with a business. Why do I say that? Well, flow, even though it's relatively new in terms of its interest by businesses, actually goes back to 1975, where psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi came up with this concept that said you need 3 things for flow. One is perceived control of what you're doing. Another is the ability to concentrate. And lastly, quite interesting, cognitive enjoyment. And so if all 3 of those things are present in a customer journey, you're going to end up with a much higher likelihood of engagement and success because people have been able to actually get into a flow when it came to your products, goods, or services. So what does this look like? Well, remember, 93% of people start on the web by typing something into a search box, right? That's where they begin. Then they get back certain answers from Google typically, but any other platform that similarly could do this, an Apple Maps, a Google Maps, a Siri. When they get the data back, they can concentrate because the information has basically been formulated using AI to show very clear choices. But what happens next? When they click on a page to go to your website, this is usually where they run headfirst smack into Conway's Law, which is they were having a nice experience, but then you kind of took away all the enjoyment because now they have no way to navigate all the questions they have from their perspective, not from your perspective. And that's a big differential in how people engage in the customer journey. Now, I would say Conway's Law actually kills the customer journey. There's never been a scenario where I've been shown a sort of a process, an ongoing process, where we haven't sort of recreated that bureaucracy. The trouble is, every website I go to, I'm forced to relearn a new bureaucracy, which is incredibly inefficient. But if we were to look at some businesses that I think really understand Conway's Law and how it is a problem, an impediment to the customer journey, you would actually probably end up here, which is what on this page tells you about Google's bureaucracy? Nothing. This page, probably the most successful page of all time, literally says, what can we do for you? What can I help you find? What are you looking for? It has nothing to do with what Google's looking for. Now, don't get me wrong. Eventually, they will certainly benefit from this. But the initial interaction is very straightforward. You can also look at Airbnb's new strategy. This was their old page. I don't know if many of you have looked at this. This is a fascinating study in commerce. But if you look at this I'm flexible button, they came out with that in May 2021. Before May 2022, they actually flipped the entire experience to move away from the classic booking engine you see here at the top to this experience, which is actually a curated visual search where you can look up experiences and engage. The booking comes later. What they're really finding is people want to engage with the content in their own manner, not under the design of a typical sort of hotel stay where it's all about the hotel getting you to book. What they're saying is what can we help you find first? You can also see this with Amazon. Amazon, I know a lot of people that didn't even know Amazon has a drop-down menu because they just type everything in the search bar. Now, what have I shown you about all three of these so far? All of these systems have gotten around Conway's Law and have created some of the most successful customer journeys by going search first. They're using AI. AI is what will actually kill Conway's Law because it allows for me not only to have a personal experience, but to have an experience where what I ask of a business will actually take me to that next step. So I show this article. This is a fascinating article. I recommend everyone read it. This is from Saria Zhao, who is an early stage investor, invested in a lot of successful companies. And I believe Andreessen Horowitz's blog picked this up. But Saria Zhao points out this brilliant construct whereby, search in general is getting more boutique. We sort of had, everything in a mess. Google and Yahoo and Bing and everyone came together and tried to make sense of the mess. And now it kind of feels like everything's a mess again. There's just too much content and information. And so what Sari points out is it's no longer enough to organize the world's information. That's obviously Google's mission statement. What she is saying, it's becoming important to organize the world's trustworthy information. And the reason why that's so important is not only will AI potentially kill Conway's Law, but AI is actually going to exacerbate the first two struggling problems in the customer journey. It's creating content and creating additional noise. So you have to start to curate the trustworthy information. At Yext, in our business, our mission is always that the business, the brand, is the most authoritative source of information on whether or not they have a product or they're open for service or whatever it may be. We never crawl or gather information. We go to the brand for the data because we're trying to only deal in trustworthy information the way that Mrs. Zhao is pointing out. But the problem, as I was saying, is AI is starting to write for AI. In fact, if you haven't seen some of these large language models, this is absolutely something everyone should be focusing on. And there's lots of companies you can try this with. I recommend copy.ai is a great one to just mess around with a free account. But if you look at these, GPT-3, which many of you have heard of, what you may not know is GPT-4 is due out later this summer, and it's going to be a lot more powerful than GPT-3. But GPT-3 and BERT and all these different platforms like Palm that was just recently announced and Lambda at Google, these are platforms that can actually write compelling, great content about a business or about a product. So when you think about being able to scale a personal experience, it's not just about better copywriting or scaled copywriting. It's actually about tying together and speaking or providing context or information to an individual based on exactly what they're looking for. It's the ultimate power in personalization, where if I ask for Nike men's shoes size 9 on a particular website, you can actually write out a description of what I'm looking for and read it to me so I can have an engagement and a personal dialogue. Where we see this going is that those systems that create language, oftentimes they tend to lie a little. They make things up because they don't know all the information that you're looking for. But if you do something very interesting, which is you take a knowledge graph, which is all of your brand data, your company data. So where your stores are, what services you provide, what your products are, what sizes you have, all of that data, when you structure it in a graph with all the proper relationships between those data sets, which is very different than a classic sort of serial architecture. When you do that and you feed that data to some of these large language models, you get this amazing best-in-class experience. And I'll show you a quick example of this. I took our knowledge graph and inserted myself as a demonstration into this, where I asked one of the large language models to write for me an article about hurricane insurance in South Florida, where I live. But I told it, when you write the article, make sure you include all these additional facts so that I could control that it wasn't just making up untrue statements. It's actually feeding in factual knowledge into the large language discussion. So you'll see things like, as a South Florida resident, you should know that hurricane insurance, it's time to be vigilant. But then it says, Christian Ward, a State Farm and Allstate agent who specializes in hurricane insurance. It's doing that because I'm marrying knowledge graph technology with large language model technology. And that's where we see this going. Another fascinating space that I advise everyone to start experimenting with is AI images being created for AI. So if you haven't heard of DALL-E 2, it's definitely worth looking at. There's also Imagen from Google. But DALL-E 2 is also from the company that made GPT-3. And its concept is you can feed it a very basic prompt, something like macro 35 film photography of a large family of mice wearing hats cozy by the fireplace. Does everybody have in their mind what that might look like? Does it look something like this? That's incredible. That's a photo that has never existed before. AI literally just took that small prompt and said, I kind of think this is what you're looking for. Now, think of that as a commerce or a platform for selling goods and services where you have whether physical and online assets, where you want to look at images or create images. You can actually feed this system photographs of what your products are, and it can actually merge it into other experiences. Like, for example, this one is funny. Teddy bears working on AI research in the moon in the 1980s. That's incredible. And that's just a taste of where this goes. Now, it gets a little scary because you could basically ask to see a grizzly bear in a leather jacket on the Joe Rogan podcast experience. Or you could do one of my favorites. It doesn't even have to be photos. You could say, just give me early designs of the iPhone by Leonardo da Vinci. Truly amazing how this information has come together. And so when you look at images like this, what you're seeing is this process by where we can actually use AI to create content that is not only for humans, but for other AI systems to rank. And I said earlier, you can have one image and ask it to alter the image. Here's one where we have a corgi in front of a museum piece, and you can actually say, can you put the corgi in the painting? Watch what this does. Literally paste it, but in the actual style of the painting. So you're getting to this point where very simple interactions are allowing where we say, hey, AI is going to stop the bureaucracy in the customer journey, the thing blocking. But you also have to see what AI is doing for creating more problems in terms of additional content. So how do you piece all those things together? Well, ultimately, the goal is that you need to bring together the ability to understand language with truth and facts and knowledge. At Yext, our whole focus is building those structured knowledge graphs that allow for you to take advantage of these types of technologies. But realistically, it's also the journey where AI will help you as an organization overcome Conway's Law, and provide a far superior customer journey. So with that, I thank Commerce Next for the opportunity. Up next, we have Charlie Cole. He's the CEO of FTD, and he'll be talking about how to be your own disruptor, how FTD embraced its digital transformation. Thank you.